Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannisen from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Roy Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel, and welcome to another podcast, whether it be via iTunes or Spotify. We appreciate you taking the time and tuning in for this brand new episode to chat all things Supercoach, Dream Team, AFL Fantasy, Ultimate Footy, and your daily fantasy. I got Rids on the line. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, mate, pressure's on. It's only a one-on-one session again.
Looking forward to it, man, because I got some big questions that our Patreons have sent our way, and you can join the Patreon army at patreon.com/coaches panel. And a special thank you to some new premium Patreons that have joined this week in Zach Taylor, Dean, and also Craig Dunlop. We appreciate your support. They and others have got involved with some questions. There is some conversations I want to have about letting people know about some new positions that are going to come for Ultimate Footy. Haven't been announced yet, haven't been revealed yet, but I want to talk about them in a little bit later on in the episode. But before we get any further, Rids, there is some trade questions I want to get to. There are some players I want to talk about, but right, I guess, at the top of the gate is when you get to 3 rounds into a fantasy footy season, again, regardless of kind of the format you choose to play in a salary cap perspective, year on, year out, there's a guy or a couple of guys that just kind of come out of the gate absolutely on fire. Maybe you didn't see them coming, or maybe are guys that have gone, oh, geez, they've gone even better than any of us have anticipated. I'm curious, mate, right out of the gate, how do you as a fantasy coach, how do we as a fantasy community differentiate between a guy who's just in a rich vein of form that has a timelined end date on it versus a guy who is becoming a real deal premium and is someone we want to get before they price themselves out of the market?
So it's a little bit more difficult this year with those new rules that have been, introduced.
Yeah.
So we don't have the data against the new rules from years gone by. But what we do have is we have general trends, okay? So what we can look at is, let's look at a Lockie Whitfield, okay?
Sure.
Because I'm sure he's probably the guy on the top of the list at the moment.
Yeah.
So he's currently going at 130 across the formats. That's about right, isn't it?
Ballpark, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just focus on DT and AFL Fantasy. The last guy to go over 130 in a season, and I'm talking for the full season, would have been Dane Swan. Now,
yeah.
I know Tom Mitchell made 129 last year averaged and then 127 the year before, but I can't remember anyone else going over 130.
Rocky, maybe?
Oh, well, yeah, Rockcliffe potentially, yeah. So there was 2 guys, okay, but they had absolute massive years of 35 disposal. They were always in the coalface. The ball goes to them all the time.
Yep.
Rightio. Can an outside type player average 130 or better? Now, I'm trying to think through the last few years. Sam Doherty had a really big, massive year as an outside player. What was he, 117 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's high one teens, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think of someone else who might come right.
Well, some other guys that I guess maybe sit into this category of, really big scores, that whether or not they're out of the blue or not. Maybe we could say someone like a Heath Shaw back in 2015, went on that kind of tear and was enormous for fantasy coaches. Last year, Jackson McRae started strong and then just kept going, but it had never really been the big monster premium. I guess that's the question, isn't it? How do you know? Because both those guys, after about round 6 or 7, when it's like, oh my gosh, this is legit, they're almost too far priced out in terms of you're now paying for them at an average that is not sustainable, and if it is, it's going to cost you 4 trades to get to them and a crap load of cash.
Yeah, that's where you've got to start justifying it. But at the end of the day, over all those years of data, there hasn't been a guy like a Lockie Whitfield type player that's gone 130 over, in a season. So realistically, what are we expecting him to go as his breakout best season ever? 110,
Yep.
115?
Yep.
You know? So, I mean, there's at some stage he's going to have to score quite a bit less to get to that average, okay?
Mm.
And it's going to be over a couple of periods, like a period of a month or something. Remember 2 years ago, we saw Rory Sloane come out and absolutely smash it. Like he was averaging 140.
Yeah, after
And
like the
then
first
about-
5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6 weeks. And then what we saw was teams, we thought he was untaggable at the time too because of his work rate and everything else. But teams worked him out. And then suddenly he became taggable and he ended up fading big time, you know?
Yeah.
And we see this every year. So we see like guys like Jack Crisp,
Yeah.
for Collingwood come out and absolutely have a barnstorming start to the season and then just fade away to nothing. Like, you know, Jack went, 140 the week before against Richmond and then 40 last week. So that's a perfect example, like, of the fluctuations. If these guys, like, don't see that ball, like, in the role that they have. So, I mean, at the end of the day with the Whitfield, I'm pretty much I'm pretty much sure that this is just a rich rain of form at this moment.
Right.
And that at some stage, teams are going to go, you know what, we can't allow this guy to run around and have 30-plus disposals every week because his disposals do hurt.
Yeah, and it's unlike other players in the Giants' midfield, which is certainly not an understatement because they got some real class, but he's probably the most damaging player right now, given that Kelly's still coming back to full fitness. He's the most damaging midfielder. And you're right, you look at the upcoming weeks, you know, for GWS this week, a matchup against Geelong. They're really difficult to get a lot of outside easy ball on. The midfielders are scoring well, but in terms of plenty of freewheeling marks, they've really shut down opposition sides thus far into the season. Again, only 3 games of data, they've done it. Fremantle, they're at home, but you'd probably think that maybe a Banfield or a Conker, who's probably more likely. We saw him doing a tagging role.
I think Darcy Tucker this year's been playing that role as
Yeah,
well.
Tucker's done a good job.
I mean, they do have options.
Yeah, then you get into...
I mean, I was just going to say something with Whitfield.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think, like, you look at an Andrew Gaff, okay?
Yeah,
there's
sure.
a lot of disposals on the outside, but a lot of his stuff is little chips sideways or, you know, down the ground. You see a lot of those 15, 20 metre chips. With Whitfield, he really does... He's that type of player that's a 70-metre player.
Yeah,
isn't he?
that's right.
He sort of runs with the ball and then he sort of delivers it long. And that's one of the things that I was sort of going to say. Like, I think it's got to come down to, like, some teams will end up going, next time they play West Coast, will Hutchins go to Canelio or will it end up at Whitfield?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, so... it may end up swapping around a little bit. And we saw that a couple of years ago. You know, Ben Jacobs went to a Cochin one week and then Dustin Martin the next. Like, so it does happen. They do tend to swap and change when that happens like that. So, yeah, sorry to cut you off about the other draw.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people understood that whilst it is possible that he continues to go around getting 30-plus every week and doing what he's doing, I don't think it's highly likely because teams are going to have to try and shut him down as one of the areas and one of the main areas to beat GWS. So
at the moment, we're talking about Lachie Whitfield. There are some other players that I do want to get your thoughts on that in a similar vein. But while we're talking about Lachie, an average of 134.7 in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. In those formats, in AFL Fantasy, he's got a break-even this week of 69. In Dream Team, he's got a break-even of 44, while in Supercoach, he's got an average of 126.7 and a break-even of 60. Again, barring something drastically happened, he's probably not just going to get that, but he's going to shoot past that by about 50 points off the break-even. Yeah. So is he the kind of guy that, if you are to get him, is it this week, and then if not, you've got to wait for that price to dip, or is it, no, there are still better value options around that you should be pursuing other than Lachie Whitfield right now? Well, if I said to you at the start of the year, would you be... Okay, and I'm only talking about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Okay, if you could get Rory Laird cheaper than Lachie Whitfield in defence,
what would you say to me?
I'd say, where the heck do I need to go to make that happen?
And I'd expect that like at the start of the year I'm talking about, not now, because everyone's influenced about what happened last week. The start of the year, 80%, I reckon, of a poll, who's going to average more out of those two, would have went for Laird.
Oh, if not more, yeah.
Okay, so at this point in time, let's be realistic, okay? Don't go chasing those points. They're gone. Yes, he's going to go up in value another 25,000, 30,000 this week,
yeah,
and potentially over the next couple of weeks. But it's only going to be until that 169 drops out of his 3-week average.
Yeah.
As soon as that happens, he may even come down, averaging 120. So this is where that magic number we were talking about last week comes into play. A lot of players are going to be gaining a lot of money coming up. You know, you look at the Liberatores, the Walshes, the Constables, the,
Dersmers, Rosies, Crouch.
Rosies. Like, there's a lot of coin to be generated.
Yeah.
So this is where it really levels out nicely. So even if you pay, you're paying $760 this week, I believe, for him.
Depending on the format, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to drop, peak out much more than 800, 820.
Yeah, AFL Fantasy's the one he'll crush past 800,000 this week.
Yeah, well, AFL Fantasy, again, we're just not quite sure the way, that they peak out. So at this stage, it looks like the break-evens are always maintainable for these guys.
Yeah.
So in AFL Fantasy, I would be suggesting jump on the best of the best now.
Yeah.
Okay? Before they go blowing out everywhere. But in the other two formats, Supercoach and DT, I don't think this form is sustainable. I'm going against what's happened in the past, okay? The best defender I can remember was 117 by Doherty. I keep saying 117. It might even be a little bit less than that.
Yeah.
But let's say 110 plus was Doherty last time I saw that.
Yeah, it's Doherty, it's Laird, it's Lloyd.
Now,
these are the big
MJ,
ones.
If you told me at the start of the year Jake Lloyd would average 120 for the year, I would look at last year, okay, and I'd go 107 with the new rules. There is a little bit of scope for a few kick-ins and play-ons. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it is feasible, but it's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
So again, I think Lloyd is more,
more likely to maintain.
More likely to maintain that average than what Whitfield is currently.
Fair enough. And what you're also highlighting is if you are looking to bring in a quote-unquote premium defender this week, for whatever reason, again, maybe you're looking at moving on an injured premium midfielder or a suspended premium midfielder and you're trying to strengthen up your back line. What I'm hearing you say from your perspective is there's a little bit of value in Laird, and I also think based on the way he ended the game last year and what I know about the Crows opening next 4 weeks is his fixture looks pretty tasty too.
Well, I'm not just highlighting Laird. I was just highlighting Laird because he's now just dropped under the price tag of
Whitfield and Lloyd. Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay. But what I want to do is I want to highlight that, okay? Now, whilst we're thinking about doing that sort of stuff, what we haven't done is we haven't talked about the guys who are benefiting massively and are, they're right in the ballpark of being potential top 6 defenders for the year. And they would have come out of nowhere. And I'm talking guys like Tom Stewart.
Yep.
I'm talking guys like Dan Rich.
Yeah.
Jamie McMillan.
Yes.
Christian Salem.
Yep.
Wayne Malera. Nat Sucklin.
Yep.
All of these guys have benefited from that kick-in rule. Okay, and they're all in the 90s at the moment. Is that sustainable for these guys? Unlikely at this stage, but who knows with a Malera or a Salem.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying, okay, to you, that I think Laird represents at his current price tag better value than what Whitfield does, at 30,000 less than Whitfield, then what would I be saying about Wayne Malera, who's averaging mid to low 90s?
And he's 100,000 cheaper than that again.
Well, he's 200,000.
Yeah. No, it makes
You know,
sense.
what am I going to be saying about a Daniel Rich, who's 200,000 cheaper? And Brisbane have got possibly the best, fantasy-friendly draw for the year.
Yeah. So,
You know,
is that where we as a fantasy community sometimes feel a little bit more comfortable with a name rather than the scoring? Is that where we start to trip ourselves up at that point of time?
well, I think at the moment, okay, we've become really sheep-like mentality, like where we seem to hype on one or two guys, whether they're going well or not going well, and then it becomes, we must get this guy in straight away. Whereas it's like, well, is it sustainable? Where's your better value? Where can you spend 200,000 extra in another position that could get you the same points, you know, combined as spending it for the one?
Yeah, gotcha.
Like, you've got to start looking at that team. Like, and then I'm not saying that Wayne Malera might be the type of guy that you want to keep for the year, okay? But whilst Adelaide's got a good run, let's throw in Tom Lynch, let's throw in, I don't know, Tex Walker, who's probably really cheap at the moment. Brad Crouch, I mentioned him last week.
You did.
Like, if I'm saying Adelaide's got a good month ahead for fantasy football, like all of these guys benefit from it. You know, so
don't just lock on the one. Yes.
Well, do I jump on one of these guys, use him as my F6 or D6 for the time being, and then when the time comes, then do I jump from him to a Whitfield or him to a Laird or him to one of the bigger name guys? Because truth be told, there's not a hell of a lot of cash cows coming through at the moment.
Well, that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? It's going to be, we got this massive onslaught of cash cows all at the start of the year. We got all the Port Adelaide ones. We got all of the Geelong ones. You could build a case there's a couple of Fremantle guys, maybe the odd Saint that's going to drip feed in potentially if some sides that were in finals calculations as we get to kind of round 6 to 8 may start to look to give kids an opportunity. I'm talking about sides that haven't started the way they'd anticipated, such as Melbourne, Adelaide. You could probably throw Richmond in that, all still very capable of playing finals. But as the year goes on, if luck and form doesn't change, then we may get some. But you bring this interesting point where at round 4, and normally at this point of the year already, we're starting to be able to clearly identify cash cows that debuted in round 3 or cash cows that debuted in round 2 and go, all right, I know I'll be able to jump from this player that I've currently got. He'll get close to his max out price. I'll be able to quickly pivot over here. That'll help me with it. We can start to kind of picture that. And maybe Sydney Stack last week from Richmond is one that could do that for us potentially. Sure, let's have that conversation. But it is a very interesting point where I'm looking on the horizons of cash cows, and our Patreons will know there's a huge document we released to them, over 50 cash cows we analysed. There's not many cows left coming out to pasture.
Well, Sydney Stack's an interesting one, okay, because he's come from nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long does he maintain that role? He's currently playing a role that's been held by Hooley for the last 5 years or so. So, I mean, does his impact get limited by Hooley? How does it impact when Jaden Short comes back, you know? Like, because, I mean, he would have been the beneficiary last week of the Jaden Short injury
100%.
in the first 5 minutes. So Richmond's an intriguing one because there's quite a few injuries there to the point where we might see a few debutants.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to be very cautious with those guys because they may be out of the team when some of the bigger names coming back, you know?
Yes.
Because you're not going to play a Jack Ross over a Trent Cotchin in 3 weeks.
No, of course not.
So, I mean, that's where the interesting part will be. Like, how do the Tigers deal with the kids? Do they just go for youth in the next couple of weeks? How do they maintain that, you know? Melbourne is an interesting one. Now, if Lockhart is the obvious guy, but, I mean, he's playing a small pressure forward role.
Yeah.
We're seeing Atkins and Gibbons playing. He might score 20 one week and 50 the next. And we highlighted this in the pre-season, okay? That's not exactly the role you want.
Yeah.
You know, so... But then we've got guys like Rosie, okay, who've come out and absolutely had a blinder on the weekend.
Playing a small forward role, yeah.
300,000. So if you're going to go a rookie that's not playing to, let's say, a Schultz, okay, who we were big on a couple of weeks ago, like, because AFL Fantasy, he was the best buy-in for that week.
Yeah.
You had the minus something. So And that's how you've got to play AFL fantasies, jumping on those big break-evens. So, like, let's go a Schultz to a Rosie, you're paying a lot of money. A lot of money to get that. And it's like, well, okay, what happens if Rosie comes out and scores a 25 this week? Let's just say hypothetically, okay, Dylan Grimes comes back, close to an All-Australian backman.
Sure.
And goes and plays lockdown on a kid playing his fourth game of football. I don't expect he's very classy and everything else, but I don't expect him to go well. It'll be a learning curve type scenario because it's happened to many of this. So, you just don't know what happens the week after. Like, we've called it, what was it, a roulette, a lottery last week with the rookies. To a degree, it is a bit, So, you could get 100 one week, 20 the next. We only have to look at Bailey Scott.
Yeah.
He sort of scored 100 week one and then hasn't been seen for 2 weeks.
So do we need to start, and again, every format requires a different strategy, but the traditional way a coach would approach a year, especially in Dream Team and Supercoach, should be get a cash cow on the bubble week up before their third round and the price cycle kicking over. Run them for another 4, maybe 5 games of price increases, potentially, depending on how it goes. Do we need to start looking a little bit more creative in how we generate cash to get to our completed side quicker? Do guys with great break-evens, and you can go and check them out now, who's got the best break-evens across all formats over at coachespanel.tv. Do we need to go and look at guys who have already had a price cycle jump, but have still got plenty of cash to be able to burn? I'm even talking about guys like Tom Liberatore, who's a little bit more expensive. Do we need to start looking at him? Do we need to look at guys like a Rosie, even though they've had a price cycle jump? Do we need to look at, a Myers, who's now had a couple of nice 60s and 70s a row? Is that how we need to start looking to it, approach it, and almost... Yep, I know I've missed one price cycle jump, but it's okay. I need to find other ways because we may not get those basement cows as frequently as we'd liked based on previous seasons. What
we should do is we put AFL fantasy in its own little basket.
Of course.
Okay? So these questions have to be asked about Supercoach and for Dream Team. So let's just put AFL and market over there for the time being, fantasy, okay? So for these two, though, I think you have to start looking at all options. Once upon a time, it used to be one downgrade to one upgrade.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm just not seeing, A, the options coming through to downgrade to, and B, the top guys just aren't falling the dollars like that we would have expected, So McRae's come out and gone 120s,
Yep.
So, he's only going to drop that 20 or 30 grand. Grundy's come out and after a disappointing week one, has gone bang, bang with 120, 120.
Yep.
Whitfield has gone off his head to start the season.
Devon's been, it's Devon and Laird, really, isn't it, in Supercoach and Dream Team that have been a little bit behind the pace.
Yeah, but even with Devon Smith, there were signs on the weekend, his tackling's back.
Yeah.
So if you're watching the game, and again, you need to watch the game.
Yep.
You can see little signs. Laird, okay, he scored an 85 or whatever in Dream Team, but the fact of the matter was he scored 40 points in the second quarter.
Yeah.
Just to highlight the fact, hey, I'm still around. It's just that the ball hasn't hit me in the first.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you go, okay, what's going on here? And the weird thing about McRae's game on the weekend, okay, was he only had a 10-point first quarter.
Yeah, I think he was under 40 before half-time. It was pretty much a 90-point second half.
So it says to me that it was in a losing effort.
Yeah.
They lost to the Suns. But he still found the ball and found the man enough to get to that score. So I'm sort of now starting to think, look, we don't have the opportunity of going one down to one up. It's almost 1.5 down, to get to that one up.
Yeah, it's almost 3 trades now, isn't it?
So, let's say 2.5.
Sure.
So if you're going to make 10 upgrades for the year to complete your side, let's call that 25 trades.
Yeah.
Of course, you can pinch off Tom Lynch as your F6 or a Nick Newman type as your D6, okay? And it might be one down and one up.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you now, you haven't started every single top dollar player.
Yeah.
So to get even a Walsh in 3 weeks to a McRae is still going to almost cost you 2 down roads.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a real tricky one. So, and then on top of that, okay, we're seeing the rankings. I've never seen this before, MJ. Like, there is a real blanket over about 3,000 teams. And I'm talking for the first 3 weeks, only 550 points covers the top 3,000 teams in Dream Team.
Mm.
I've never seen that before. Like, there's just so much knowledge out there, but everyone seems to have started the season well. So it doesn't matter if you've started pure mids, pure defenders, pure forwards. Everyone seems to have gone very, very respectable. And so what that highlights is the fact what we were talking about last week with Heaney and Dunkley is these guys aren't going terrible, but they're slightly underperforming from what our expectation was. And so we suddenly highlight these guys, don't we? And we go, oh, do we need to trade them out? Do we need to go Zach Merritt down to do this and do that? In essence, we don't need to do any of that.
Mm.
But we're looking for things now because we're thinking 2,500 ranking is a terrible ranking, even though, in essence, you're only 500 points off the leader.
So how far away, and I know every format is different, how many points away right now should you be feeling like, okay, maybe you've had a slow start? I know you've said a lot of coaches had a ripping start. Maybe they've nailed the Lloyd and the Whitfield and the Kellys and the Cripps and the Boakes and the McRaes and, you know, the Bontempellis for Supercoach, for example. If you're still, you know, within 500 or 1,000 points of the overall leader right now, are you starting to get a little bit, oh man, I'm going to have to go a little bit left to centre here to make up ground? Or are you still going, no, keep to the strategy, pick the right cows, nail the execution of the timing? Is it a cause for concern if you've started off pace a little bit? Or is it keep the course? Okay.
No, I don't think so at all. I think the dust is going to settle later this year in comparison to years gone by. So we always used to say, well, you don't really look at any of the rankings until about round 4 to 5.
Yeah, sure.
Rightio.
Yeah.
And then it sort of gives you a general idea of where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
This year, though, it's out of the ordinary. Like, this year's been really, really random. So if you own a Rockcliffe, like in Dream Team, and topped his 40 last week, then suddenly you're 50 points off the pace.
Yeah.
You know, and that's actually really, really massive in regards to the rankings overall season.
Yeah.
So I think this year we're almost going to be waiting until the buys, until the dust settles. And I'm actually thinking on top of that, buy strategy this year is going to be more important than any other year so far because those 2 big rucks are around 13 buys.
Is also the added element of no teams have finished their buy as we enter into the multi-buy round, which we've become accustomed to over the past couple of years. There will be no Gold Coast or Port Adelaide players that we can, you know, run through that 3-week period of time.
Correct.
Making that first buy week especially, and those first 2, really difficult for coaches to navigate as we enter in.
Spot on, mate. 100% correct. And so what we've got now, is we've got a 6-6-6, like, through the buy round. So it's like, we're going to have to find, like, let's say in round 13, we're going to have to find 18 scorers, just 18 scorers out of a 20 positions because of those 2 rucks.
Yeah.
Now, yes, of course, we might have a Zach Clark or a, what's his name, O'Brien or whatever, but that's going to be luck. You know what I mean? That's going to be luck that they play.
And it's going to be 40 or 50 points. It's not going to be anything that saves your bacon.
Mate, and I can tell you now, if you've got 18 on the field and you've got Gibbons and a couple of other guys on there at the same point in time, because everyone's going to have a Lloyd in the back line. So let's remove him straight away. I'm looking at a Witherden, who's very, very popularly owned at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got the same bite. Let's look in the midfield. You've got the Melbourne boys, okay? You've got the Geelong factor. You've got Collingwood factor. You've also got guys like Lockie Neal.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there, okay, and you think, oh, bugger, I started Treloar and I started Brayshaw or Oliver.
Neal.
I really think Lockie Neal's going to be the number one scorer for the year in this format.
Yeah.
How do you bring him in if you've got Grundy and Brayshaw? Because they're your three bench already in the midfield. And we're not even looking at Constable or Atkins or any of those guys, you know?
Yeah, and then you add, like you said, that forward line. You're going to have Dangerfield. Tim Kelly looks like he's right in the mix. Dalhouse, Menegola, Heaney. You're going to be in a bit of trouble in round 13 again.
Buddy.
Yeah, Vardy's.
Can people say no to Buddy at 400,000 in a few weeks?
Yeah. No, you can't.
You see, it's just got to that stage now where you're all sitting there and you're going, round 13, I'm predicting, okay, mate, if people don't, and I'm not saying don't
get the best players,
Grundy and Vaughan, or get the best players or anything, but you have to manage it. Okay, you have to manage around that bye round. Because the last thing you want is to get 500 points ahead of the pack
and lose it in 1 week.
500 points less of the pack that round.
So I'm curious, we're 3 rounds in, we've got, some level of data that's how reliable it is longer term. Look, hindsight's going to be the great thing. You're right. You're talking about guys like a Lockie Neal, who's, the past 2 years has been an absolute super coach beast, having a even better year at Brisbane. Dream team in fantasy, he's been that solid 100 guy with a bit of a ceiling every now and then. We saw it in round 1. The past 2 weeks, he's gone nuts. Where is the point in time for us as a fantasy coach? We're 3 weeks in. While we don't want to have a 3-week period be the hijacker of getting the best player, when do we need to start re-amending what our kind of start of season upgrade and downgrade plans may have been? Using someone like a Lockie Neal, who you could probably say, like in Supercoach, we talked about Whitfield across the formats, but you could probably say Neal's like that in Supercoach of, is he on a tear? Should we get him now before he goes big? You could probably put him in that conversation too, but if you don't have him in Supercoach right now, do you go... The
difference with Lockie Neal, mate, is he's gone to a new team, okay?
Yeah.
So we're not seeing those prolonged stints up forward anymore.
Sure.
We always knew Lockie Neal was a Supercoach beast.
Yeah.
We've seen him go 110 plus in Dream Team. We've seen him go massive in Supercoach, okay? We know his ceiling's through the roof. So, but we also know he's got a guy called Zorko in his team who might be easily taggable and actually affects the outcome a lot more against Brisbane than what tagging Neal would be. But again, there's going to become a point in time, okay, with Neal. Does he get the attention over Zorko?
Yeah.
So this is why it's important to watch the games and make sure the draws match up, and see who's doing it. Right now, I think there's De Boer for GWS, who seems to be tagging.
And really hurting too.
He's tagging that inside bull at the moment.
So he's heading to Dangerfield in your eyes this week?
Oh, has to, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Has to. So I don't see any reason why he goes anywhere else.
Yeah.
Unless Dangerfield goes forward and then obviously he takes the next guy.
Yeah.
Now, we saw that on the weekend with Richmond. He was going to Dusty Martin when he was in the midfield and then bouncing over to Cochin when Dusty Martin went forward. So it was a double-edged sword. Okay, so he's one guy. Hutchins is another guy that seems to lock down and shut out a guy every week at the moment. What we're not seeing is guys like Harms and Hewitt actually impact him, which is really nuts because Hewitt kept like Cripps last year in
barely anything
to like 57, and yet we saw him not go anywhere near Cripps this week.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's just one of those things where it's like the philosophy of the coach at the moment. We see Greenwood go and tag 1 week and do nothing the week after.
Yeah.
So I just don't know the answer, mate, at the moment with that. But the fact of the matter is with Neal, we know he's capable of going on these massive, massive runs.
Yeah, right. So as a fantasy coach, as we now see these guys having massive runs, these guys scoring, is now the time before, generally in Dream Team and Supercoach, you've probably not made enough cash generation to be able to start doing a pure new upgrade. You may be still doing a fixing trade. You may still be doing some massaging, but in terms of a pure quote-unquote cash cow downgrade, cash cow or a mid-pricer upgrade, whatever it is now the time we should start re-amending our plans of where we were targeting to bring in players. Now that we see some guys that we've seen them drop away with some really high break-evens. You've mentioned a Buddy Franklin. You've mentioned a Rory Laird, for example, through there of a guy who's a little bit under what we'd expected. Is this the week we should be going, okay, I've got 3 weeks of data. I need to re-amend my plans, remap out what between now and round 12 looks like with the first of the multi-buy rounds? Or do we still need another week or two before we can kind of look to change what was the initial trajectory we may have set out heading into the season?
Okay, so I think with a guy like Laird, who's got a break-even of 150 across the formats this week, you've got another opportunity to sit and watch.
Sure.
If you're not on him already.
Yeah.
With a Buddy, if you're not on him, you've got another week to sit and watch.
Yeah.
But with a guy like... let's say, who's got something that's reasonably decent.
A Devon Smith, for example?
Okay, let's say Devon Smith, who's not been outstanding by any means, but he's still scored a 90 and 100 in his last two. So someone like a Devon Smith, okay, you need to make that call this week or the next week and then work out when you're going to bring him in. If you're not bringing him in this week or next week, his buy round's the first buy round.
Mm.
So you're not bringing him in with enough games to actually justify it to that buy round.
Yeah, gotcha.
So if you've got someone else who is equally as important to you, Tim Kelly, with a later buy round, you're getting one game extra out of Tim Kelly in that section of games than what you are with Devon Smith. Okay, so it'd be much, if you think Smith's going to average 100 and let's say Tim Kelly 90, at 10 points a loss per game, and there's only 7 games, that's only 70 points.
Yeah,
so
gotcha.
You're still 20 points better off for having Tim Kelly and then bringing in Devon Smith after his bye.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's where you've got to start actually really getting close, because we're only at week 3, week 4 now, but there's no cash being generated yet.
Yeah.
So we can't go down and up at the moment. So we're sort of like, we're looking at sideways and just making little bits and pieces trades at the moment to fix up structural issues that we started with, or making sure we grab certain key players. And it's an interesting one with Grundy this week. Do we jump on Grundy, don't we? Like, that's an interesting one because he's got a very good matchup.
Yeah.
So, but do you keep the faith with what you've already worked out? Is it a Jared Witt? Is it an Incurvis, okay? And you are looking at moving them to Grundy through the buys. At the moment, they're only 20, 30 points behind Grundy for the year. So I think it's way too early to be jumping now. Different if you had Sam Jacobs.
Sure.
You know, and that's what we were talking about last week. Bringing in a R3 might have been the better option, because if you had Riley O'Brien on the field in Supercoach instead of bringing in a Grundy with a trade and costing you $300,000,
yeah,
you know, it's only a few points. It's only 30, 40 points difference.
That's right.
And so that's where it gets interesting and stuff. And it's not going to happen like that every week, but, you know, some weeks you do need to get that luck factor.
Yep.
So, yeah, so long story short, you've got to back your gut and you've got to watch the games. You've got to highlight the fact of when someone's going to go on a run, not when someone's in a run.
Yeah, you want to set the trend in that regards and not react to a trend.
Well, what I say the other day in our chat, you want to jump ahead of the sheep.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to be the shepherd.
There you go.
You want to know where you're going, have that player there before the sheep come charging in afterwards.
Okay, so maybe we're giving away too much. Is there a shepherd player that you can see right now that you go, I reckon based on a mixture of role, a mixture of fixture, a mixture of maybe opportunities, is there a shepherd type player that you think could be the right one? Again, it's speculative, it's predictive, no one knows what the future. But is there a type of player you go, I think he could be the guy that sets a trend?
Yeah, Tom Lynch for Adelaide.
All right, there you go.
And I've given away too much because I'm in cash leagues and everything else. But I will be bringing in Tom Lynch as my F4 if teams go right this week.
And that's the variable, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it. You've got to wait for teams because at the moment they're very unpredictable.
Yes. No, just ask Lockie Schultz owners. They'd be able to tell you about that. Hey, man, love some of your thoughts. Want to get to some of the Patreon questions. And again, if you want to join the Patreon army, you can do that at any tier you choose to at patreon.com/coaches panel. First question we've got in for you, Rids. I want to kick it over to you. It's from Stephen in AFL Fantasy. He's talking rookie defenders. He's got Dersma, Scrimshaw and Clark. He wants to know, is it too late in AFL Fantasy to go after Connor Rozee?
I don't think it's ever too late to go after someone.
Because at the moment he's priced at $385 with a break-even of -14 in AFL Fantasy.
Yeah, so the key's the -14. So I don't think so, no. I think he's definitely... But again, I'd prefer to bring someone that's not performing or performing at a level down to a Rozee than going up from a Hoare or someone like that, and spending the money.
Yeah.
So I want to try and use that money and leverage elsewhere.
So you're talking someone like maybe a Jordan Ridley or a Cade Simpson or this sort of option.
Let's say Brodie Smith.
Sure. Yeah, Brodie, Zach Williams,
Zach Williams, perfect.
Yeah, maybe not a Supercoach, yeah.
Yeah, but this is where you can do a little bit funky in AFL Fantasy. Let's say, but again, you've got to be careful because you really have to play that break-even game in AFL Fantasy compared to the other games.
Yeah.
So one of these guys might actually have a very feasible, like a 20 or 30 break-even and a friendly matchup where they might score 100.
Yeah.
So you still need Rozee to score 60 to match the difference.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's where you've got to be careful.
Yeah. No, I like it, man. New premium Patreon Craig wants to know, is Rowan Marshall the real deal, or will Longer come back into the side and slow his scoring? He wants to know, in Supercoach, is he worth going after? And in Supercoach, he's certainly come out of the gate swinging. Make no mistake about that in his couple of games that he's played. Is he the real deal, or is this just he's had a nice couple of matchups?
No, I think he's the real deal. So he's actually a real good footballer. The only thing is I've always seen him as a better forward than a ruck.
Right.
But the problem that they got at the moment is they've got their forwards line functioning okay.
Yeah.
Like with the Membry and the Bruce and everything else. But what happens is if someone like a Bruce goes down injured, does he then become a more permanent forward that rucks? So you just got to watch that a little bit.
Yeah, no.
But at the moment, I think it's his ruck spot to lose. But I don't see them having any other options as forwards coming in if there is an injury or something.
Yeah, no, fair enough too. Shannon wants to know, he's talking specifically about guys that are likely to play but have some question marks about whether or not they're going to make it. He highlights Tim Kelly and Rockcliffe. I suppose Fife, you could probably say at time of recording. I haven't heard Fremantle say he's 100% not playing. He seems unlikely more than the other two. Do you trade out guys that have a risk of being late outs, or do you just keep the faith, build around them, and hope that your cash cow doesn't have to cover for you?
Well, I wouldn't be trading Tim Kelly in any circumstance, okay?
Yeah.
So Tim Kelly's looking like he's going to go reasonably well no matter what.
Yes.
Okay, so he also had a bit of a knee injury, I think it was definitely leg related.
Ankle.
But ankle, was it? So, yeah, I mean, he's got nothing to do with concussion and going through tests and, pulling up sore. What we do have over the last couple of years is we have seen differences on how people react after being concussed.
Yes.
So some of them have a really bad patch like Angus Brayshaw did, Zach Merritt did. Other guys come out the week after and just look like they haven't missed a beat.
Yeah.
We've seen that with Joel Selwood a couple of times.
Every game he plays, yes.
So we just don't know how they deal with it because it looks like it's an individual case at this point in time from individual to individual. So I just don't know the answer to the Rockcliffs and the Fife situation. Fife looked like...
It looked horrible. It looked horrible.
I'm not going to lie. That, to me, I think it's... And I'm not a doctor. I'm not on
No.
stuff.
Well, you're not in the
know
club.
the
No.
guy, but I saw what he looked like after that contest. And if that's not a absolute stand-up case for missing the next game at the very least and letting his brain settle a little bit, I don't know what is.
So on Fife, for example, talking about Supercoach, he's relevant in all formats, but Supercoach is the one that he's certainly got the greatest history. Is he the kind of player that you would maybe look at going, gosh, here's my chance to get a Lachie Neale when he's in ripping form, and with that poor score of Fife sitting in that 3-price cycle now, do you go, I'll get Neale now, or I'll go and get a Bontempelli now? I'll go and get, maybe you've got a Lloyd or a McRae or something like that you want to get, or Boak even, is coming out of the gate hot, in Supercoach. Is that the kind of trade you'd also look as a cash option where you're like, I'll get a guy before he goes up too much and I'll get Fife when he bottoms out in 2-3 weeks' time?
Well, I would be definitely looking at that as a strategy because, as I said before, I don't think the cash cows are coming through like expected. So a Fife, let's say he misses this week.
Sure.
Okay. So what's that? Round 5, there's only 7 games left until, his bye. He drops. Let's say he has a couple of games before he gets back to normal.
Yep.
He might bottom out by around his bye. So then you can bring him in after his bye. He should be fine again.
Well, at the moment, if you're doing the Fife to Neale, for example, Neale's about $40K more expensive, but he's also got a break-even of 63. Fife's got a break-even of 169.
But again, it's irrelevant, the break-evens, unless you're going to trade them again.
Correct.
Okay, so it's only when you're purchasing or trading the player that the break-evens and the price tags are relevant.
Yes.
And people seem to lose sight of that all the time, and they start getting worried. AFL fantasy is different because we're saying you've got to play that break-even game at times.
Yes.
Okay, to generate the cash. So a Fife, if he was 160 this week in AFL fantasy, I'm not saying he is, but if he was, I'd definitely be looking at going to a guy, at a 50-40 type break-even with the same amount of potential for score.
Yeah.
So I'm trying not to lose much of my score factor. At the end of the day, though, you need to be still focused on your scoring. So if I said I had Constable sitting on the bench at M9 and Fife, okay, or a Rockcliffe, and let's say both of those guys are out to this week, I would not hesitate to trade to the best defender or forward I can get and bring Constable on for a few weeks.
Yeah. Would you even do that with a Bailey Scott?
Probably not, because we've seen too much. He's a great kid. He's going to be a great player, but we're already seeing signs of him fatigue, and I'm just not quite right. Subject's not right there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, appreciate your thoughts. Clint wants to know, it's for Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. Talking about Seb Ross, do we see any resurrection potential in him, or has he crossed that line from back in your primos through to the admit your mistake and make the change? He rode the Billings ride last year. I guess Clint seems to be a little bit apprehensive of what do I do with Seb Ross? Do I get off this train now before it kind of derails, or do I need to keep the faith just those 2, 3, 4 weeks longer?
No, there's a point in time you've got to jump off.
And now's it.
You can't ride a guy that you've paid $750,000 for down to $500,000. Otherwise, you're doing what you did with Hanbury a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
There's got to be a cut-off point at some stage. Now, if you've watched the game and you see Seb Ross playing in the right positions, by all means, stick with him.
Yeah.
But what I saw on the weekend was Seb Ross getting targeted and then going into the defensive areas at certain points of the game to play a terrible role. I don't know what Alan Richardson's doing, okay, with Seb Ross, but he is killing this guy. This guy last year went on a massive tear on the last, 6 to 10 games for the season, going at 120 plus. And he's got a massive ceiling. And you know what? St Kilda's a much better team
when he's on.
With him playing football. So I don't know why the coach would want him to go and marshal the troops down back when there's a run on. So I just, I'd be jumping ship, mate. The point in time, okay, is the ownership numbers. You can't have a unique stinking it up at 60s every single week because you're out of the picture.
No, exactly right.
If you've got a guy, a premium 50% ownership and better scoring your 60s, then everyone cops those 60s.
Yeah.
So it takes the risk factor out of it. But not a pod, mate. Not with a Seb Ross who's in less than 10% of teams.
All right, there you go, Clint. Hopefully that helps you. Feel free to reach out, mate, as a Patreon. We'll do our best to help you identify the next option for you to bring in. Tony wants to know, this is a Supercoach question, Rids. Last couple of ones before we wrap up the episode. He's wanting to take Grundy to Cripps, and he'd love to hear your thoughts on who...
That's vice captain to captain.
Correct. Is that the right move this week, given the fixture?
Yeah, I think it is. Although, who's Carlton got? Carlton's got Gold Coast.
Carlton on Sunday afternoon, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. Tuke Miller's not really suited to Cripps. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's a nice, friendly draw. But, I mean, Gold Coast have been a lot better than what we anticipated.
They're not the fantasy easy beats now, are they?
No, but they're still giving up points.
They are.
So I don't think they're particularly locking down on players.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong. I think Jack Bowes is trying to lock down a little bit around the content.
Yes, he did, yep.
But not doing much else, like around the ground. So I don't see why, that looks good to me. That looks friendly.
Yeah, no, I think you're on the right page there, Tony. Nice work from you. John Coombs wants to know, he's looking for a good replacement for Dusty Martin in Supercoach. He's around about 520,000. He has had a bit of a drop-off. Just the 1 week suspension for him, which is great news for Dusty and for Tiger fans. But as we talked about last week, probably is time to look to move him on anyway. It feels like the real simple move is to go to a Liberatore at 379,600. But if John or others do have Dusty and own Libba, is there some other guys that we could be identifying around that price range? Again, there's options in all lines, but are there some guys we should be considering through there at a similar price point?
Oh, look, I'd be looking at guys like Brad Crouch.
Yep.
Who have started the year well. Taranto started the year well. There's a couple of question marks I got on Timmy Taranto at the moment, but we'll worry about that next week or the week after. I would actually I'd get a little bit creative and try and bring in a defender or forward at around the same price tag, because I think there represents a lot of value around there at the moment.
So someone like a Travis Boak is basically an almost identical sideways trade. There's no cash really change in there, that sort of thing?
Well, yeah. Otherwise,
go down a bit more.
A guy like Nick Newman.
Yeah.
Wayne Malera we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Like
Zach Jones, if you're going to go really crazy.
Well, Zach Jones he's got a very friendly role, and he was like a couple of years ago. Remember when he started as a 300,000 defender or something? And there was actually quite a bit of interest in him and ownership on him, and he actually went well, for that year.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes, he faded at times and stuff, but he ended up going okay. So it looks very similar to that, doesn't it, like this year? So, yeah, I would actually try and get a little bit creative.
Billings.
With it and, Billings or Nick Newman or Malera or, just someone like that. If you think Tom Lynch from Richmond's going to, get better. There's a lot of options around. If you really, really, really get funky, you could go to a Rosie as well.
Yeah, true. And fix up something else if you need
those coins, and then go keep those coins free on you.
Yep.
Ride that 120 out of his 2 rounds and then actually put those coins on top of him, and you probably get the highest paid forward or defender.
Yeah,
really.
No, it's true. I like that. Nathan Ayres wants to know, which is more important to get this week in AFL fantasy? Is it to get Lockie Whitfield or is it to get Brodie Grundy? I know different points of pricing, break-evens, things like that, but just on a pure matchup this week, who would be the better one to go and target?
Does he mention who he's replacing them with?
No, he doesn't.
So if you're going, and this is my dilemma this week as well, I'm trying to be preemptive and working out whether Witts to Grundy is the right move or not this week, or whether I persist with it, moving forward. So if you're going from a Witt or a Nankervis to a Grundy, it's a really good matchup this week, and Grundy does have a good month of football ahead of him in regards to ruck draw. Whitfield's a little bit of an unknown. Is he going to get tagged? Isn't he? So, it all depends on who you actually think's got the better scoring potential gap-wise to the guy that you're upgrading, okay? So if you're upgrading a guy averaging 90 to get Whitfield in and you think it's going to cost you 20 points a game, you need at least that for Grundy to be a better option.
Yeah. And then your last question, mate, from our Patreons. Martin wants to know, what's still the priority in AFL fantasy this week? Is it fix up premiums that aren't scoring well, or nailing the cash cows and getting that break-even game right?
Well, I still think you can do both.
Yeah.
I don't think 2 trades a week allows you to do both. But again, people are focusing on the wrong premiums. Like, lesson learned last week, guys, and girls, how many people traded out Heaney?
Yeah.
There was a friendly matchup. Dunkley didn't go exactly over the top with nuts, but he still got 85.
Yeah.
It's not a 40 or a 50, is it? Heaney came out with 120 across the formats.
Yeah.
And how many people went Heaney to
Kelly?
Who was it?
Warple.
Who was the Warple? That's a 70-point drop-off.
Yeah.
In 1 week. We're talking massive amounts when 500 points covers 3,000 teams.
Yeah.
And you're giving up 70 points in one trade.
And a trade.
And a trade.
Yeah.
We just need to just calm down, relax, stop focusing on guys that haven't been terrible. And this was my point last week with Hanley, He looks 100% better this week. Came out and scored 96 in Supercoach.
Yeah.
This guy's more than capable of going 80 plus, 90 plus in Supercoach, MJ.
Oh, at under 300,000 where he started, especially what we're seeing now, he's looking real value.
Yeah, people are jumping off him after 2 weeks after averaging 60, and he's 300,000.
He's got another good matchup this week.
We've got to manage our expectations, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to go, okay, guys may have a bad couple of rounds, but they're not going at 20 1 week, 30 the next. We're talking 60s across. Heaney's going at 70s, last week across the format. Dunkley's averaging 85 in Supercoach right now. And people are talking about trading Dunkley in Supercoach, averaging 85 and not playing well.
Yeah.
What's he going to average when he plays well?
Correct.
So manage your expectations and stop harping on the same guy. This is for everyone. We highlighted this last week. You don't have to just talk about Rockcliffe or Sheed. There's 5 other guys in that conversation, Let's stop focusing on that one forward that isn't scoring 10 points better to meet your expectations. Because at the end of the day, over 3 rounds, it's 30 points. And then as soon as you act on it, you're going to lose. The people lost 70 points in 1 week. That's a lot of points to make up.
Yeah, and it just compounds the issue even further for you. I totally agree. For the reference, if you were thinking about making some trades this week, don't forget there's the Thursday night matchup, the Swans versus Melbourne for AFL fantasy coaches. You'll get the opportunity that Dream Team and Super Coaches get every week to try and have a second bite at the cherry with the vice captaincy loophole. I'd expect Rids, the real popular guys people will look at will be Lloyd from Sydney, Brayshaw, Oliver, and Gawn from Melbourne. They're probably the 4 most popular guys people would be looking at as vice captaincy options. Are there any others?
No, I think they're the 4.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I don't know about Gawn. Sinclair's been very good, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's true. Maybe a Supercoach one, but I think if you got Grundy, that might be a better move in Supercoach.
Yeah, so with Supercoach, AFL Fantasy, though, you'd think Brayshaw might be the guy.
Yeah, Brayshaw is certainly one I'd be going, and Lloyd would then probably be the other one if you don't have Gus. Friday night, Collingwood take on the Bulldogs. Cats, Giants, De Boer heading to Dangerfield would be what both of us seem to believe will happen. You've got Brisbane versus Melbourne at the G. Port take on the Tigers. Kangaroos versus Crows. The WA teams do battle at Optus Stadium. It is the Eagles taking on the Dockers. That's going to get nasty, isn't it? The Suns take on the Blues, and then to wrap it all up, it is the Hawks at Marvel Stadium against St Kilda. That is how the round is going to play out. And so whether you're making trades this week early on, know where the players are. Make sure you don't get yourself stuck like others may have done last week with certain players needing to be on or off field to take the absolute benefit of your vice captaincy loopholes and knowing where things are absolutely about that. Hey man, appreciate your work on this episode.
Yeah, too easy. And just a quick one. Remember, it's a game, people. Try different things. Have fun. Enjoy. If a trade doesn't come off one week, so be it. Move on to the next one, you know?
Life goes
on. But try and have fun. Try not to harp on it.
There you go. Life's about moving forward, isn't it? I totally agree with that. Mate, appreciate your work. Don't forget landing late Wednesday night. When I mean late, I mean probably closer to about 7 o'clock at coachespanel.tv. We will be revealing exclusively the Ultimate Footy new positions that will be added into the system after round 3. It then happens after round 6, 9, 12 and 15 in Ultimate Footy. You'll be able to go and check out who's been given a new position, who's missed out, and who is on the radar of Ultimate Footy. We will reveal that for you exclusively Wednesday night. So if you're listening to it now, quickly jump over. It may be there if you're listening to this Wednesday night. There'll be an accompanying podcast. Jimmy and I will talk you through all the players that have gained a position and their fantasy football relevance for draft coaches in Ultimate Footy. You can go and check that out Wednesday night. It will be very interesting to see which players do get it and don't. Historically, Rids, Ultimate Footy have been a bit more conservative at round 3. They've kind of waited to round 6. Fingers crossed they drop a couple of big names early on, hey?
Well, I think it's important just to give guys a little bit more relevance, you know, like guys that aren't utter premiums in midfield and stuff like that, making sure that we can actually get a nice spread across all the ground.
Well, let's hope they get it at coachespanel.tv. We've got an article of players we think may get it or certainly be in contention, but tomorrow night, Wednesday night, we will be revealing exclusively the new positions, both at an article and a podcast that you can go and check out. Appreciate all of you and your support. Massive shout out to all our Patreons for helping the Coaches Panel week in and week out. We so appreciate you. Thanks for listening to this episode via iTunes and SoundCloud. If you're loving the podcast, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends about the Coaches Panel, and leave a 5-star rating and review. We hope round 4 of fantasy footy is your best week ever, that your premiums fly, that you nail your captains, and the rookie roulette goes your way in round 4.